Hello. Hello everyone and welcome back to the Biggening Corporation. This is our 33rd episode, and today we are going to be focusing on the bot buying workflow. We made good progress yesterday, and while yesterday was a race to try to get through as much as we possibly can, today should be a little bit more leisurely in that we can focus on making things look nice. So let's do that. We left off yesterday in our bot buying workflow here, where we would buy a bot and we would select a bot, and with the different tiers that would be possible, we can then see in our next step what the requirements are and what the player is short of. So, what we did not have time to do is check to make sure that this was coloring correctly if they did have the requirements. So, since we have things still pretty open as far as being able to make adjustments to things manually, we're going to adjust these up so that way, first of all, that our test player 5 company has a significantly larger cache pile, and then we are also going to create a location and throw some basic parts and circuits and things in there so that way we can see that these are correct. Before we do that, where we had left things off yesterday, if they get to the point where they're looking at this screen and there are any items that there is a shortage of, cache or other parts, I don't want to allow the player to click next. They shouldn't be able to move on. So let's take care of that real quick. Let's see here. So we have our purchase wizard, and here we have our function that we wrote yesterday called populate requirements. And during the episode we wrote up that we would generate the requirements buffer and then we would pass that data to the resource checklist. Now the nice thing is that gets copied to the rec data set of the page. So now that we're done passing it to the page, we can do some changes to the buffer here. For example, set range shortage true. And let's see, we probably need a new variable to store this in, so let's take care of that real quick. Let's say missing materials, that sounds fine, is equal to rec.show is empty, and we want to not to reverse that. Now, yep, perfect. A lot of my little extensions helping me out here, and you can just code away and then decide if you want it to be local or global. You don't even have to create it first, which is just delightful. We're going to add that as global, and that is going to be a boolean. Okay, nice. And that's fine. Now we have a boolean we can tie to that says whether or not the player should be able to move forward. So up here we have this little function called set controls, which is going to update the back, next, and finish buttons as relevant, which makes sense, and it does so based on some of the step information. So what we want to do is here we have action next is allowed as long as our which step is less than 4, which is the end step, and the player has selected a bot type. Well, that's not really what we need anymore, is it? What we need is a few different things. So let's kill this to do, because we're about to do that. Okay, so first of all, let's just jot down all of our requirements, and then we'll see how it logically will structure. First of all, we want false if which step equals 4. You can't go next onto the last stage. That makes sense. While you're on the last stage, I should say. if there's false if there's no bot type. We want false if there's a bot type, multi-tiers avail, but none selected. Which I'm not sure, is that possible? Let's check that. New buy bot, purchasing, burn. So it is by default landing on a record, so we can skip that requirement because it's not possible to move to the next record without one selected. So that's automatic. Delightful. Okay. And then we also false if we've calculated the materials and there's a shortage. Okay, so we have a variety of potential criteria. Okay, and most of these are not terribly complicated. Most of them are straightforward booleans with one little and. Okay, that's easy enough. And we have down here, we've set a filter on this. We should set a filter back, reset it back to where it is. There we go. Because now we can do a nice simple case statement, and we can do case true of which step, and I'll do parentheses for clarity. Which step is equal to 4? And we'll say if the bot type equals blank, which we're probably going to boil this back down to an or instead of a case true of shortly. But hey, we got a structure somewhere, right? We don't need the double parens. And then last, we will need some double parens here. If the resource the resource check buffer is down here as a temporary on the populate requirements table. By it being local, we can't check that. So we have two options. We can either set a new boolean, which I'm inclined to do, or we could make the requirements table larger. Actually, we're going to need this to charge the player. Let's only calculate it once by moving it up to the global scope. It's only global within our page here, so that's fine. No problem there. I'm not a big fan of that sort, but we have some tools to help with that. So now we don't need a new boolean, we just need to say, okay, so if we've calculated the materials, which is the buffer, and the requirement to show buffer dot is empty, not, and missing materials. Okay, so if any of these are the case, false on whether or not our action next is allowed. Okay, it's a little funky, but we can work with it. Let's see here. So, okay. Syntactically, I have a hard time with the ands and the ors of all this situation. If any of these are true, we want it to be disallowed. So we'll slap some ors on these, and we will put before all of these not, and action next allowed. And this is a funky, ugly little bit of code that honestly I could almost see being better off being a little function maybe, but let's try this out. Before we go any further, we'll publish that and see if that actually does what we need it to do, because I'm not convinced that I have that structured correctly. Ticking away on our first publish of the day, thinking about life, the universe, and everything. Let's scooch that over so we can see if we're done publishing. Yes, indeed, we did make changes. Fantastic. Thank you for that. Now, our bot list again, and new again by bot. So now we have bot types. Nothing is selected, so next is disabled. Good. If we just select research, it becomes enabled. Good. If we choose purchasing and we select between these, it remains enabled. Good. We do not have the materials for either of these, so hopefully if we hit next, we should see it becomes disabled. Lovely. Well, and here we get a little goofed up. Because we moved back after the resources were calculated, that doesn't allow us to move forward. So if we move back off of the research requirements, we should effectively discard the requirements information because it should recalculate it anyways. So, okay, that's easy enough. So in this case, when we move to step 2, when we are on step 2, we should clear the missing materials. We're going to do that not during the set controls, but during the take step here. If we're on which step 2, then that's the because it was actually step 1 that we moved back to. Makes sense. Okay, so alright, so if we go back to step 1, that makes perfect sense. We'll reset the material stuff, basically. So if which step now equals 1 after we've done the motion above, we don't have to worry about handling the situation if we're on step 1 to begin with, because that's fine. Missing materials is always going to equal false at this stage, and the rec to show, we just simply delete all of those because it's a temporary buffer table. Brilliant. Whenever you're building wizards, always go back and forth, fiddle with it. The idea of wizard is that it is a multi-step process that the user should be able to go, geez, no, I meant something else, and go back. Only when they have hit the finish part of the process should it at that point be too late to make any changes. Okay, so now we go next to see our parts here, and we go back, and next is still enabled. And now we can change our mind and say sales, and it's just the money. Right. That is perfect. Okay, now let's make sure that we actually can see that the requirements are met. So first of all, we still have all of the company pretty wide open, and that's correct and fine. So we are going to, instead of, interesting, this must be in here from a earlier test run. Let's delete that. We are going to cash 0208, sure. We are going to cheat in some cash for this player. And we will give that to the cash account, and we are going to give that in the amount of Can we do this through a gen journal? Yeah, we can, because we aren't calculating anything special right at this moment. We're going to just balance that against accounts receivable. We're going to pretend that they got massively overpaid for something, because that'll work. It's fine. Yep. Okay, so now when we go to one of our bots that is just a cash-based one, we can see hopefully that we have the requirements, and we do. And our next lights up, and our font formatting is peachy keen, and we have plenty of inventory. If we switch over to purchasing, we pick our bot buyer, we get stopped because more than one, well, any requirements are not met. Okay, cool. Well, that was a good successful test run of that. Now let's create some wood parts and simple circuits in one of our dummy warehouses. That's not too bad, just some adjusting. If we look at our locations for test player 5, we have a variety of things. We set up some basic locations, so I'm going to use this location right here. One thing I will say that I'm not a fan of about the web client, it sometimes is harder to copy and paste cells. Used to be you can just right click on things and copy the cell value, and that would make it easy to do some things like, I don't know, copy customer number, document number, those sort of things. C'est la vie. Okay. Now we will create a positive. Oh, interesting. Let's delete this entry so we get the correct posting date. We're going to do a positive adjustment into our cheat 0208, and we are going to do some metal parts. And oh, interesting, we don't have in this company all of the parts required that we had specified in the bot list. So when we do a new bot of purchase RoboBuyer, we have wood parts and simple circuits, but I don't think we have those as items. Okay. What do we got? We have fabric parts, metal parts, and simple circuits. Okay, so we're just going to go change the template real quick, honestly, just so we can keep testing this here. Bot templates, U materials. U materials. We want you not to be wood parts, but metal. Okay, great, and that requires 2 and 1. Sounds good. Okay, so now we will do some metal parts, and we are going to do some simple circuits. We'll make there be, I don't know, let's do 100 of each, so it's a nice round number. Great. Sure. Sounds good. Post, yep. And yeah, it does help to give a location, doesn't it? Let's go with our basic one. The bot purchasing system is not location specific. You can use items from any location, which makes sense. Great. So we buy a bot, we say purchasing, we say RoboBuyer, and we are doing just fine. We have plenty in stock. I'm not sure how I ended up with 200 of this, but maybe we had that before. I didn't think so. Possibly I just typoed on my positive adjustment. Alrighty, well anyways, we have the things required, so now we can next on and we could do an assignment to this event purchasing bot, which is optional. It will be in our interest to players to simplify things that we will potentially change the caption or the instructional text based on the different bot types, but that is not a today project. What we do want, however, is when we do this finish action, which we're going to cancel out of, we do want to then execute on the purchase. And that we don't have anything in place for yet, other than the actual purchase bot. Now, we are calling a procedure in bot management to execute that purchase. So if we go to our definition here, we see only that we create the instance. We don't see anything here that will charge for the cost of those materials and things like that. Since we have moved the purchase bot function out into the bot management code unit, a pretty logical place to have it, I'm also inclined to move our material requirements check here out to the management code unit. So let's do that. Which is sort of funny because oh no, I'm being a dingbat. The generate requirement buffer is here. Okay. So that's fine. Alright. Since we did that the right way, that's fine. We will want to, in the purchase bot workflow, I think we will charge inside the code unit. So to do that, we are going to assume that the person has already populated the purchase costs, the resource check buffer here. And with that in mind, we are going to update our purchase bot call to require that. And that means that here it should complain about it as soon as, there it goes. Okay, good. And for that, we will just do requirements to show. We will pass this into the purchase bot code unit. Now, this table, we have stored the description, the requirement, and the inventory and noted the shortage, but at this point we have not added to it anything that would let us come back from that displayed buffer of requirements and say, okay, well, how do those connect to anything? So it would probably be a good idea here in the resource check buffer building process if we stored the item number that we're charging. And if the line is empty, if that value is empty, we'll assume cash. That seems reasonable, perfectly serviceable at least. So we will do a new field, which our field code. Nice. Item number, which will be a code 20. And table relation. Nice. BCS master item. And system metadata works fine for me. Cool. I like it. I'm still not super interested in adding to that captions the way the template requires or recommends. I mostly am self-translating, so that's not needed. In a multi-team environment, it would probably be pretty useful to provide that info. Okay, so that is item number, and it's okay if that's blank, but we should populate it. Up here, we're just going to leave that empty, but down here we will set it. So, res check buffer dot item number is equal to master item dot number. Simple enough. And now when we get later in the process to the resource check buffer, we have which item number to charge for. Okay, so what we will do first, before we generate the instance, is we will charge the materials to the player. And then we will, down here, create the bot instance. Okay, perfectly fine. So, we are going to repeat through our res check buffer. If the res check buffer item number is equal to blank, because there's almost always going to be a cache charge. Let's do those as little functions. That sounds like a good idea. Charge player cache. And I think we may even put that off into another code unit, because we could use that in a couple of places, really. Yeah. I was just trying to see if there's a logical place for charging people for things. Because we're going to also charge players for location purchasing, so a generic purchasing charge code unit would be pretty useful. And then we will pass this function the requirement, which will be the cache amount to charge. Yeah, actually that'll work just fine. And then else we will charge player materials, and we will pass it the res check buffer item number, and again the res check buffer requirement. Okay, so those are going to be nice and simple function calls, but we do need to create them somewhere. So in the power posting, let's see, we have a charge workflow already in place. Because this creates a gen journal line and then charges the player for that. And it's simply enough to takes the bot power account. So let's create a little code unit that is just all about charging players for things. PCS player charging. Sure. That works just fine. And we are going to steal this function, which will make it blow up a little bit, but that's okay. And we are going to steal our charge player cache. Since we are always going to be calling BCS player charge dot something, let's call it just charge cache, because it's already implicit that we're charging the player. So that works fine. Okay, and then we also need to handle a couple of little things, like for example, game setup. We need the cache account from the game setup. Record BCS game setup. And we also are going to need to pass in a posting description, because that goes into the, oh no, not posting description, a document number. So doc number, which will be a code 20. Okay, and what we'll do is we're going to take this, and we are going to pass the doc number parameter into it. So that as itself is okay now. Now we've got some post line issues here. So what we will do is we will do a doc number code, so that way we can specify the document number. Let's see, and that will equal to this. Yep, that's nice and simple there. Okay, now we need in here to have a reference to our player charge code unit. So code unit, BCS player So instead of post line, we will pass a player charge dot charge cash, and we will say, okay, so now we just need to slide in the doc number as a parameter towards the end here. There we go. And we are charging for bots here, and then we just need to charge for bots down below. So very similar. Okay. Cool. Now this code unit is not going to blow up, but we now have moved off this already functional and useful posting routine that charges cash to the player charge. So now we can simply take our player charge code unit, and here we will do BCS player charge charge cash. And what it's looking for is which account to charge. The charge amount and the document number. So I'm just thinking through the charge account, and that, if we look at our chart of accounts, after all, we have to spend that money somewhere. That is going to be operating expense, I would think. No, that's what these fixed assets are for. Okay, so when we buy a bot for 1,000 cash, then we have 1,000 cash worth of bot. Okay, yep, brilliant. That's probably going to need to be setup driven, but once again, much like many of our to-dos, there's going to be some, it'll have to be set later. So we want a GL account 1410. And then we just need what document number, which document number, I'm inclined to say, I almost just wanted to be the designator, but I don't think that'll be unique. Well, document number doesn't have to be unique for this. Because if we look at our gen journal, I don't think I've got any number series set up for, nope, I don't have any number series set up for bot. Okay, so yeah, we have to supply it with a document number, but it can technically be anything. So let's pull this designation logic out here, and we're gonna say bot designation is a code 20, and we'll do right here at the beginning a bot designation is equal to generate designator. Sure, and that way we can just pass in the document number bot designation. The document number and the posting date are extremely unlikely to be the same with this and how quickly the date changes over, so it should be fine. Now we just need to have another routine where we do a negative adjustment out for materials, and that's not too crazy. So okay, we're gonna have ourselves another journal generation though, and that can sometimes be a little funky because of some of the invisible values that you have to have. So we're going to create a new procedure, a lot like this one, which is charge material. And then we obviously need material code, which is going to be code 20. We are going to need to know quantity, let's do quantity to charge, so that way we're not potentially overlapping names. And we'll also do a doc number code. Sure. Okay. Now, for this one, we need... this one's a little bit more challenging. We don't require the player to have their materials in a specific location. But depending on the location setup, we have to charge the materials in a different way. So, for example, if we are charging 10 metal parts and they have 5 of them in one location, 5 of them in another, even if those are both basic locations where we don't have warehousing turned on, that's still 2 separate ledger entries. If we have the materials in a basic warehouse and an advanced warehouse, those are not only item entries, item journals, but also warehouse journals. Oh, I didn't think about how nasty this is as a thing to write. Okay. Oh, man. So, we only get here if the player has had enough to charge this quantity. So we're going to do a pretty weird thing in that we're going to do a for loop, a repeat until the quantity to charge equals 0. But anytime we do a countdown style repeat, we need a safety bailout in case something goes terribly wrong. So we are going to need the item table for sure. We're going to need the location table for sure. We are going to need the item journal for sure. Item journal. Let's see, and I'm being a space cadet and not typing the names of the tables. We are going to need the warehouse item journal for the warehousing locations, which at the moment we don't have any setup for those, so we're not going to have to worry about this yet, but we will. Okay, so now we are going to need a remaining quantity to charge that is a decimal, and we are going to need a loop safety integer, just because I don't like trusting that we are going to get to the bottom of a loop successfully when we're counting down or deleting or modifying the token that we're handling. Okay, so let's make sure first of all that material code, yep, and we're gonna do a double check here that the item calc fields inventory hasn't changed somehow in the intervening time. If item inventory is less than the quantity to charge, then we will scream, rant, and rave. Oops, var, and this is going to be insufficient items error label. One of the things that I find really helpful but uncommon, if you are potentially throwing an error message at someone to say you don't have enough of something, like the inventory availabilities and things like that, first of all, within the message, always give someone a primary key to start with. there are way too many places in the base product where if you go to post like a warehouse picking or something like that with item tracking on, it'll say, you have insufficient quantity. What? Of which item? There's 1,000 on this pick. I don't know. And then separately, if you are checking quantities against something else, like again, if you're checking, say, maybe the quantity of something available to pick in a bin, present the user with both sides so they have somewhere to troubleshoot. If you are calculating the available amount in a bin and then you're comparing the requirements against it, make sure in your error message that you are showing the requirements and the calculated availability, because it's hard to track what's actually supposed to be. Maybe there's an availability, the reservation that's wrong. So give your users something to go on. Which item and what is your basis of comparison? So with that rant aside, because I freely admit that was a rant, we are going to say that here we have the item.inventory and that we are comparing against the quantity to charge. There we go. So that way, if you're supposed to be charging 10, but there's only 5 on hand, it'll say of this item you only have 5 of 10. What an idea. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to repeat until remaining quantity to charge is equal to 0, or our loop safety has hit, 100. Seems plenty enough. If you've managed to spread your inventory across 100 different locations, you deserve some of the madness you're going to get, honestly. So the way this works is nice and simple. Just in the beginning of your repeat, we will increment that up. So this way, the loop, no matter how stuck we get, at some point there's a point where the loop will end and something will have gone wrong. And here we can then say, if for some reason we have bailed out, if remaining quantity to charge is greater than 0 still, then we know something went wrong. And we can tell the user a little bit more about it, and we can say, let's see. In this case, we would only get here if we were somehow not able to find all the inventory. So, unable to find items. Let's see. Unable to locate sufficient items in locations. That's a poor message. Unable to locate. I mean, if we don't have enough, it should already trip. But at least by giving this message, the user is giving something for system administrator to go on. So, let's do an error of unable to find items, and again we are doing the material code and the remaining quantity to charge. So this way, if we do bail out of the loop, somebody is able to chase something somewhere, and there's a little hint when a user sends a screenshot to somebody as to, oh wow, they managed to get something messed up. Okay, so now for our next step, we are going to cycle through each of the locations that have this item in stock. We cannot, however, to the best of my knowledge, filter on location to say, item filter and then has balance for this item. I mean, that would be posh, that would be pretty useful, but we can't. So I think we're just going to be iterating through locations. We do have total stock. We created this total stock. I wonder if we could create an item filter on that, actually. Hang on a sec. Might have just talked myself into doing a useful thing here. So we've got the location table where we added this total stock. It's looking at a sum of item ledger entry where the location code is blah, blah, blah. Well, there's nothing to say that we can't add a flow filter into this calculation that does it per item number. And as a matter of fact, if we go look at location, is there already an item filter? That is a flow field. It might just be. So let's look, and let's do this a little smarter. Naming wise, they're usually pretty good about naming things, something filter. There is not an item filter. Okay. That seems plausible, because what we're doing is a little weird. Typically you start from the item and then look at the locations, so we're doing it a little backwards, but I think, yeah, let's do it. Okay, cool. Then we can say on our location table, we are going to add a new flow filter, which will be right down here, field 88 102. We can just use the next one. BCS item filter, just so that way we never namespace collide with any of the potential changes that they might make. And this is going to be a code 20 because that's what it is. And our caption is just going to be item filter. We don't need the BCS in the caption. We're probably never going to display this on a page. So flow filter and I think table relation on item. Yeah, there you go. Okay, cool. So, and the way that this flies in our calc sum here is then we also do in our where clause a comma item number, which is the item number on the item ledger entry, equals, I want to say it's going to be field BCS item filter, because there was a use the value as a filter. Calc formula. Let's check this out here real quick. We want to. Okay, so no, we should be able to just do it as a field. Okay, I'm overthinking it a little bit. Because it is a flow filter type, we can just say field, and it will automatically handle it correctly as a filter type. So that's cool. We don't have to do anything special now on this. So if there is no flow filter on the item, we will still see the total stock quantity, and if we do put a filter on the item, then we will only get stock for that item. Neat. Alright. We've created the function charge material, so let's just the red file name of you have failed to create the function call is bugging me. Let's see, we have a semantic issue there. Okay, charge material, blah 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 blah. Charge material. Save, and let's scoop with you. We have to also do the doc number. There we go. I just wanted all the red to go away so we could potentially publish and run if we need to. So, alright, so now in our bot, no, our player charge code unit. Yes. Now what we can do is we can say location.setFilter range, actually, on this one, BCS item filter to the material code, and we can set range on total stock set filter greater than 0. Now that's a bit of a beast for the system to calculate. We are asking it to do a lot of things with that, but it's not too rough. I'm going to do a very simple little piece of something here. In our charge code unit, yeah, that's what I thought. We do have a commit before we do the run on that, so we can't really test the charge material without accidentally charging the cache for the bot. That's okay. So what we should have here in this now is we should have a list of only locations that have the on-hand inventory. And what I think I want to do for the moment is we've got all these different entries created, and there's nothing from a system perspective, there's nothing that simple and easy designates a location on whether it uses specifically warehousing or does not use warehousing. But the way our workflow of how we're designating those, and that there's only kind of 2 modes for a location to exist, we will require shipment on the advanced locations every time, and we will never require that on our basic locations. So we can try to keep it simple, as it were, and we can say try all the simple locations first, and the basic, keep our language sensible here, and the reason for that is that it's a heck of a lot easier just to do a single item journal entry and post that single item journal than it is to post the warehouse adjustment and then also the item. If I hadn't clarified it in previous episodes, one of the things that is a little bit funky to get used to is that warehousing and inventory are parallel married systems, but they're kind of a two-headed ogre in that they can look at each other and disagree. And you do have to run some steps to make them agree. So I definitely want to try all of our basic locations first because it's going to be easier code to write, and we will to do up our handle advanced locations. So the way I'm going to do this for my environment is real simple, require shipment false. Alright, now what we will do is for this location we're going to then create and post the item adjustment down, but obviously we need to repeat through location. Okay. So for each of these we are going to adjust down. So we'll create a local procedure. Adjust out simple. Our item. Yeah. Item code. Geez, this is me being at the end of my workday. I'm a little brain fried. Let's see. So we're going to pass it the item code and the quantity to reduce, which I'm not calling it just straight quantity to minimize how much I potentially confuse it with field names in the code, because that could create some problems. And we will also need the doc number code 20, just like we had up above. We are going to create lots of little lines with the same document number on the same date, and that is perfectly acceptable in how we're doing this. And given that that's the case, we can pull the item journal out here to our local procedure. Just squinching. I like some white space between different things. I suspect eventually there's going to be some complaining about like unnecessary white space, but sometimes it really helps to read, so I really hope there's no code cop rules about that soon. Okay, so for this location, we are going to adjust out simple the material code, the location dot total stock. Now we have a small little bit of calculation to do before we can call this function. If we need 10 and our very first location has 100, we are not going to charge 100. But if our very first location has 5, we are going to charge all 5. So location calc fields on our total stock, it's we are filtering on it, but that does not guarantee that the field has been calculated for this record that we have moved onto, so it's wise to go ahead and calc fields on that. We have already set the items filter, so we know we have the total stock for that item. So if the location dot total stock is greater than the quantity to charge, remaining quantity to charge, once we're inside this loop, we always should use remaining, which reminds me, remaining quantity to charge is equal to quantity to charge right at the beginning. Okay, and if we are dealing with greater than that amount, then we will adjust out only the remaining quantity. However, if the location total stock is less than the quantity to charge, in our case like the scenario I painted where we have only 5 in stock and we need 10, then we will adjust out the total amount in this location. And once we have done that, we will then take the remaining quantity to charge and reduce that by, let's create a variable here, quantity to reduce, and store that. So let's do this. Quantity to reduce equals the remaining quantity. That way we can make use of it twice here. And here the quantity to reduce equals the location total stock. There we go. Now we can call this function once with just the quantity to reduce, and we can subtract the quantity to reduce from our total charge. There we go. Okay, now here in our scenario where we find 100 in stock and we're going to charge 10, we go ahead and do the adjust out function call. That's going to go and post the reduction of 10, bringing the total stock in that location down to 90, and our remaining quantity to charge goes down to 0. However, even though we're inside this loop where that now is true, so we should be able to escape, we are still inside of the location loop here. So it's important inside of this location loop to also have a catch scenario where if the remaining quantity to charge drops below or equal to 0, actually just if it's greater than 0, then begin. So we will only do this little bit of code if there's anything still to act on. Cool. We could just as easily do the same. Actually, yeah, just for consistency's sake, let's, rather than wrap that in an if, we will add that to our bailout conditions. That way we're consistent. Nice. So now if the quantity goes down to 0, this becomes true. We bail out, and we find our way to the end of the function. Cool. Simple enough. Alright, well, that's a good bit of code, but unfortunately we have to create some item journals and we need to post it. And that's going to take a little bit longer than the few minutes extra that I think I can spare today. So I am going to call that a pretty good start towards charging players. We will charge them cash, but we will not charge them items. And we can test that real quick before we wrap on the day, just to make sure our cash charging works correctly. But then we are going to have to call it a day. And tomorrow we'll dive into the fun world of manually creating an item journal out. We are slowly building towards I need to do another time lapse just to tackle all the to-dos that are things that should be driven by game setup. So that's probably going to come soon. We need it. List, because it's not exciting. I mean, it's just adding fields to setup, and you've seen me do that for sure. Okay, so if we go into purchasing and we buy the 10 bot here, because those require that, we're not going to charge these yet because we haven't created those requirement charging systems, but we should charge 10. And I noticed the cash has gone down significantly since we last looked at this because of all the power charges. It's funny. Alright, so next, finish. Do we get errors? Whew. Okay. So this is delightfully one of the most nightmarish error messages that you can get as a developer. Because there is no good way to debug this. So what is happening here is that the automatic system that watches how you're posting your transaction has detected that this will create an out of balance situation and violate the rules of accounting. That's bad. What that means is that somehow or another the gen journal entries that we're creating and hitting post on are wrong. Significantly wrong. Okay. Wowzers. I didn't know we were going to hit one of those on stream. Okay. So, I can tell you right now, I know what it is, on the bright side, thankfully. We used game setup. I created the variable for that. We're balancing against it, but we didn't do a get. So technically we created a journal line entry where we were balancing against a blank GL account, which meant that we were just trying to steal 10 from the player's cash account and disappeared into the ether. As a developer using the standard posting code units, you cannot make cash just vanish out of the system. That does not work. That is a very good check. You should, if you get that error about consistency, you have done something wrong and you should not try to get around it, ever. But debugging it is a nightmare because often you will see that many layers deep. It's very rare that you're going to be creating gen journal lines and posting them wrong. It's usually from something much deeper in the system. Okay. Bot FT, blah, 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 purchased. Cool. If we go to our registers, that's the report version. Sure. Thought that would give me my... I've run into this once or twice where I'm thinking, yeah, okay. This still looks like a report. It is. Okay. My brain's just not wanting to do this today. Okay. I thought it was under archive. Okay, yeah, that's what I was looking for. Okie dokie, so here is a Gen Journal that got posted right here. Perfect. So let's look at this one here. If we look at our Gen Journal entries, we can see the document numbers for the bot number, and we had charged 10 against the cash account, and we balance that against the bot account. Okay, cool. And if we look at our chart of accounts, which again I ran the report version like a dingbat. Excellent. Okay, so there we go. We have 10 worth of bots in our fixed assets. Because that, the reason for breaking this out is I want to be able to use that in our wealth calculations and also do some comparatives. After all, if you spend all your money on like the last day of a season on bots and locations, that should still count. So, all right, perfect. I'm pretty happy about that. We say which bot we bought. That's a sentence. All right. Cool. Then tomorrow we fight with item journals, and we are going to reserve for a future episode fighting with creating the warehouse adjustment entries and posting those, because that is a whole nother process and not recommended. But we technically are this close to our bot buying workflow being done pretty much forever. That's fantastic. So I will call that a pretty good episode. I appreciate everyone sticking around, and I'll see you tomorrow. Take care, everyone.